it would have been a path that I chose.
Right.
Right, that's fine. It would have been a path that I chose, and I would have always wondered, what if? And that's the thing. It doesn't matter what you choose. It matters that you are quiet enough to listen to yourself.
Hey everyone, it's Tony Will. I am back with another fantastic episode of Women In, and I cannot wait for you to meet my next guest. But before you meet her, let me tell you what you're listening to. Women In is a podcast that celebrates women from all walks of life and the people who uplift them. Each episode features incredible voices from my world, sharing stories that spark inspiration, challenge the status quo, and remind us that empowering women empowers everyone. This is a bold, curious, and uncensored space where disruption is welcome, forward thinking is encouraged, and change is the goal. I'm passionate about breaking down barriers, not just for us, but for the next generations. Whether our paths cross professionally or personally, these conversations matter. Let's dive in and celebrate the power of connection, growth, and the people who are shaping our world, and this woman is definitely one of them. Dr. Jen Rafferty is an educator and author, a TEDx speaker, and the founder of Empowered Educator, an organization transforming the culture of education by placing educator well-being at the center of school success. She holds a PhD in educational psychology, degrees in music education and vocal performance, and certifications in emotional intelligence and neuro-identity evolution. As a former middle school music teacher, Jen knows firsthand the challenges and joys of life in the classroom and the toll it can take when personal well-being comes last. Her own journey from burnout to balance ignited her mission to help educators reconnect with their purpose, restore their energy, and feel empowered as leaders both in and out of the classroom. Hey, Jen.
Hi.
It is so cool to have you on the podcast. Welcome to Women In.
Thank you. It's great to be here and talk with you again. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. So tell everyone how you and I got connected. I think the power of saying yes is always weaved into these little stories. So I always like to start there. So how did you and I meet?
Yeah, we were introduced through a mutual friend, through Jason, who I know was involved with you in some way through hockey, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And he and I found our way to each other through the company, through Empowered Educator, and he thought it would be a really great connection if the two of us met, and he was right. He's hardly ever wrong about that. I don't think he's ever been wrong about making a good connection. So I'm grateful for him for that.
Yes, Jason did connect us, and as a matter of fact, I interviewed him on Women In. His episode came out, I think it was like a week or week and a half ago, and he mentioned Empowered Educator in his interview. So I don't know if you've listened to it, but if you haven't, give it a listen.
Yes, I have. It was great. He was really excited to share it, so I was happy to listen to it. It was great. It was a great interview.
I know, I learned things about him. I was like, you eat roadkill? I mean, the things we learn. And it's like, and there was no shame in his game. I'm like, good for you. And he's probably going to listen to this. So,
Yes.
do you eat roadkill, Jen?
Nope, I have not. Nope. I live in central New York, so there's some, venison that neighbors and friends, make, and but that's I don't know exactly where it comes from, but I want to bet that it's definitely not directly from the road.
Correct. Yeah, I draw the line there myself. I'm sure I said I'm terrified of dead animals on that podcast because I am. So,
Yeah.
anyways, I digress. Yes, Jason is how we met. And then when Jen and I met, and I want to start here because I think this is we have a lot in common. But first, that was so cool is you and I are both becoming published authors a week apart, and this is your first book coming out, correct?
This is my second book.
Your second book. She's already a published author, so it's my first book, her second book. So let's talk about your book. Jen is coming out August 4th, but it's available for pre-order now. So let's start there.
Sure. So the book is Empowered Educator, 10 lessons to prevent burnout, reclaim your joy, and unlock your teaching potential. And truly, this is a work that's reflective of the last 20 years of my career and the research that I've done and my own observations in and out of the classroom. And it's a roadmap for educators to move from a place of feeling like they're frustrated in their current situation and feel as if they're stuck and they don't have very many choices, to understanding that they actually do have agency in every single moment. And we don't just talk about how to talk about these things. This is really a toolkit about how to embody it. And that is the stuff that's going to make actual change in their own lives and in the school communities where they work.
Yeah, so educators hold a very special place in my heart. My mother was a school teacher, as well as both of her sisters, my aunts. And so they taught, all taught third grade, which was kind of interesting. And then my mom went to fourth and fifth grade later in her career before she retired. So, this is a household I grew up in, and I saw how hard she works, but it was often like, oh, but teachers get the summer off. But the reality is, it's not really off for teachers that are wildly passionate about what they do, and it's a hard school year. So I guess let's talk about that, because in your bio you talk about burnout. It is not easy to be an educator, and it's much different now to become a teacher than it was back when my mom did it, because women didn't have a lot of choices in terms of a career back when she was doing this. It's much different now. So talk to me about all of that, and what you see with burnout in teachers and putting themselves first, and what that looks like, and your own experience too.
Sure. Well, I guess we can start with what burnout looks like, because oftentimes we think of it as the end of the rope where the symptoms can no longer be ignored. But we know cognitively that burnout starts way earlier than that. And I think the silent symptoms are the ones that we really need to be looking out for. Things like brain fog, things like lack of motivation, things like the physical symptoms that you may feel that you brush off as maybe something else. So, for example, I've worked with thousands of educators at this point, and one of the themes that comes up a lot is we talk about how does stress manifest itself in your body, because what's true is your body talks to you all the time, and we are terrible listeners. So when we consider, well, what does it look like physically when I'm feeling stressed, the typical things come up, right? There's chronic headaches, there's back pain, there's stomach issues, your shoulders want to become your earrings all of a sudden, you can't sleep, you sleep too much, you don't eat, you eat too much. And so we kind of brush that off as it is what it is, and oh, I'm in my 30s now, or I'm in my 40s and my body's changing, so I have this symptom that's not going away. No, those are symptoms of burnout. Those are symptoms that your body is screaming at you to pay attention. And we just don't. So many of us don't do anything, or we self-medicate, we take some Tylenol, or we drink a bottle of wine or two on a Friday night, or a gummy, and then we call it a day. But we're not actually addressing the underlying issue. We're just treating a symptom. And so months go by, years go by, and what happens is educators especially are living their life counting the days till Friday, counting the weeks until summer vacation, and counting the years until they retire. And so a typical conversation at the faculty room becomes, hey, how's it going? And it's like, well, 12 more years. And for me, that is so unacceptable at this point in the culture that needs to exist as a flourishing, thriving, fertile ground for our kids to grow up in. They deserve better, and the educators who are in these spaces deserve better. And we're recording this right now in Teacher Appreciation Week, which drives me insane, because Teacher Appreciation Week highlights 1 week out of the year where we revere everything that they've been doing. And it's such a dangerous narrative. We need to be paying attention to these people who take care of our kids all the time. And it has to start with them understanding how to do that for themselves.
Do you think that the shift, I guess the pendulum swing, I would call it, in people choosing to become educators when they're in college, do you think that the pendulum swung the other way, meaning people aren't, going into education and wanting to become school teachers because of what you're talking about, because of the burnout, because of these seemingly, not the word's not coming to me, but the blindness around like a teacher appreciation week. It's like, why are we just doing this for a week?
Yeah.
And do you think that's part of the reason why?
We're doing it so we can sell stuff. That's why we have Teacher Appreciation Week.
Yeah.
But yeah, right. I think that's part of the story, but I don't think that's the whole story. I think, especially since COVID, the whole landscape of education has really shifted because the needs of our students increasingly got larger, particularly with their need for emotional connection and simply the skill set that they were getting at school that didn't happen when they were home for that time period. Teachers went through a big traumatic event too, and we all just kind of ignored that and we just kept going, and we're talking about the learning gap and how are we going to close that, but we never addressed what was going on in the teachers' lives during that time either. And I think also the increase in technology and AI, our kids are dramatically different than they were several years ago. So I think the burnout is part of the low hum that's always existed, but all of those other things have really turned up the heat. And while I don't want to spend too much time here, politics added fuel to that fire, and the educational landscape in our country is affecting the way people are able to show up and feel as if they can teach with integrity with why they wanted to be in the classroom in the first place. So it's a mixed bag of all that stuff.
Yeah, my daughter, my youngest, is going to school to be a teacher, and special ed in particular, and all the jobs that she works right now or has, she's always drawn to. She works at Aquatot, so working with little kids to teach them how to swim. She works at the country club daycare with little kids, and every time she tries to work in a job that is not centered around children, she hates it. And so I feel like it's a calling for a lot of these educators. Is that how you felt in your story? Tell me your story and why you were drawn to become an educator yourself.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people it is a calling. It's not always the case. It certainly was for me, and I resonate with your daughter's feelings about that. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I grew up with my sister playing school and having a little grade book that I would have a special red pen, and we would do that in our room. And I knew I wanted to be a music teacher because music was also something that was a huge part of my life as a kid. And in high school, that really sealed the deal for me because my music teacher there, Mr. Williams, he was phenomenal and really drove home the idea that it's not just the content, it's not the music, it's the sharing of the music that makes the human connection with somebody else. And my gosh, that was how I felt I was really going to change the world. You know, if I could teach kids how to find their voice and make the world more connected and more beautiful through music, that was to me the most important thing I could do in this world. And I look now at younger versions of me and I'm in love with her. You know, she had this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed idea of what the world was going to be as soon as she stepped into a classroom. And so I love looking back at that former version of me. And the reality of what happened in my story was I did just that. I did great in school. I loved teaching, just like how you were explaining with your daughter. And I got into my first job and I had a middle school job. I was teaching 7th grade general music. And I remember I knew my content like the back of my hand. I knew how to teach really, really well. And I had my philosophy of music education that I had just written about in my last grad class. And I felt wildly unprepared when I walked into that classroom. And I was pissed about it because everyone said I was doing so well. I thought this was a slam dunk. And what happened was I didn't know who my kids were. I didn't understand who adolescent kids were in that context. And that piece of it led me down a path of studying adolescent cognitive brain development, because I had thought that if I understood adolescent brains differently and more thoroughly, I could create more responsive curriculum for them. And that's exactly what I did. So I dove into that research really early on in my career and started shifting the way that I change. I shifted the way the material was presented to them, and I changed their experience in the classroom. And that changed my experience as a teacher. And through that, I realized, oh my gosh, I have a brain too. And so I got really interested in cognitive development and cognitive neuroscience for everybody. And so as the years went on, I made really great programs at my school. I made a whole modern band program where kids were playing guitar and bass and drums and keys and producing and writing and performing their own music. And we were going on tours, and I was conducting across New York State and presenting nationally. I published my first book in December of 2019, and I was ready to do the university tour and do the whole presentation thing for my book. And then of course COVID happened. And so during that time, I ended up, my husband and I decided we were going to get a divorce. I moved out of my house with my two kids who were 5 and 7 at the time, the same weekend the world shut down of March of 2020. And I had to really consider who was I? Everything that I thought I was the day before. I was a teacher. I was a director of my choirs. I was, singing itself at that time was very dangerous at the beginning of COVID. People were dying and singing in churches, so that part of my life I felt like was ripped away. I was no longer a wife. I no longer lived where I was. And so I had to really have this crossroads moment with myself, as so many of us did. Who am I? Who did I want to be? And what was the bridge that was going to get me there? And that was really the journey that took me from being an educator in the classroom to what happened next.
Wow. What a amazing story of, all the things and the best laid plans too, right? And
right? Yeah.
Where in that story, I'm curious because we've both done TEDx's too. So where in your story was your TEDx?
Yeah. So after that moment of, ugly crying, like, who am I decided to stay home to homeschool my kids that fall of 2020. So I took an unpaid leave of absence and really dove into more of that research of emotional intelligence, because I went on my own healing journey, as one does when we're kind of walking the dark night of the soul. And so I started my PhD in educational psychology and realized, teacher burnout, again, wasn't anything new, but we couldn't ignore it anymore. That was really the forward-facing story for that moment in time during COVID, where everyone was so grateful for all of the teachers in the world. I mean, it only lasted for like 5 minutes, but there was a moment there where teachers were really in the spotlight, right? And I wanted to share the information that not only I was learning, but that I was practicing, that was helping me get through the burnout that I was experiencing. Because looking back, what I realized at the end of my career, while I was killing it, I realized that the job was also killing me. I was sick a lot. I had incredible back pain all of the time. I had these weird skin rashes that developed that 0 doctors could figure out what that was from. And it ended up all being stress related. And I'll tell you, Tony, it wasn't until about 2 years ago, so I had already been out of the classroom for 3 or 4 years, that I stopped being in denial about how much burnout I was feeling in my career. And I looking back, I was like, wow, I was hiding in plain sight and nobody knew, and I couldn't even admit it to myself. And so to answer your question, I ended up resigning from my job in the spring of 2021, started my company, Empowered Educator, and practiced the things that I was teaching. And I owe my whole career to those practices of what came after my teaching career, because 18 months later, I was on the TEDx stage in, fall of 2022. 18 months after that, I was featured in Forbes, and 18 months after that, I got a book deal with Penguin Random House. And it's been an incredible journey. Don't get me wrong, snot bubbles were a huge part of that whole whole journey. It hasn't been all rainbows and sunshine. There's been a lot of growing pains and roller coasters as it is in any career. But that was the trajectory of what happened when I started practicing the things that I teach.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a phenomenal story because number one, there's a ton of courage weaved in all of that. And so back up to that point where you're like, okay, I'm going to resign. I'm going to start my own business. That in and of itself is, you recognize, like, it's hard to even admit you're in burnout, but you're like, I'm going for this. So what is it within you? Or if someone's listening to this and they're like, I want to do that. I just don't know, like, how do I get past the fear? So how did you get past the fear?
It's a great question, because that question is really the crux of it all, right? I mean, those are the keys to the kingdom. And I'm sure you have an answer to this question also, because this is very aligned to what your work is. So for me, in my world and how I practice and what that question means to me is, fear is biological. There's no such thing as fearlessness. That's not a thing. And I think especially as women, we set ourselves up for failure when we say no fear, no excuses, no fear, because it's a falsehood. Fear is biologically important for your survival. And so when you hate on your fear, you're fighting against the very thing that's trying to protect you. Because at the end of the day, your brain has one main job, that's keep you alive. And when you are crossing a busy road, that part of your brain is the thing that stops you from moving until it's a green light and you can use the crosswalk, right? It's why we don't touch a hot stove. It's also why we don't always go for our dreams. It's also why we don't always take risks, because your brain doesn't have evidence of you doing the thing that you say that you want and surviving. And so it's going to do things like flood your nervous system and your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline. It's going to share all of the thoughts of doubt and insecurity and imposter syndrome. It's going to give you physical ailments for you to stop doing the thing that it thinks you're going to do and die. And it sounds dramatic, but when you think about the biology of it, you realize, A, there's nothing wrong with you, and B, you're perfectly human and everything's working as it's supposed to. So leaning into fear is the way you navigate through the fear, recognizing, okay, I say I want to do this big, bright, beautiful, scary thing, and now all of a sudden I'm too tired, or I'm kicking the can down the road, or I just don't have enough time, or all of these reasons why you can't. That's fear, and it's really sneaky. And so what I do as I teach and I practice, part of it is sharing how to recognize when fear shows up. So you, as the person who has a brain, gets to decide what to do about it. You either get to be in the driver's seat or you're in the passenger seat, and your brain wins and you lose. And that process is the magic. That's the secret sauce.
Yeah, and that is very well said in a really hard question to answer, but very well put, because the brain, we have all these thoughts, 60,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. Some of those are fear, right? And it doesn't mean it's real. A thought is just a thought. It's not a directive. And so we get to choose what we put meaning to. And so if the thought is, if I leave this job as a music teacher and I'm accomplishing all these wonderful things and creating programs and doing this, I'm never going to have that type of job again. And you let those thoughts win, you would still be in the classroom.
Yeah, I sure would.
And not that that's a bad thing.
No. Trust yourself, because that's a whole nother conversation about self-trust, right? And actually have the skill set to move through. That's what not just my emotional intelligence training, but also my Neuro-Identity evolution training really is about, is whenever we make these big changes, we are actively changing who we are and how we see ourselves. It's an identity shift. So we're not just changing one job to another. It's, okay, I am a teacher. I identified with that very much. Or I'll put it in another term. I am busy all of the time. I am stressed out all the time. I never have any time for myself. That becomes part of our identity of who we are. I put everyone else first. I make sure that everyone eats before I eat, and I usually get scraps. Like, this is part of the identity that becomes the story and the narrative that we play out day after day, month after month, year after year. And we wake up one day and we're like, how did I get here? And what is true is, when you want to make a change, it is so much more than what you're doing. You also have to do the work underneath it to actively change your neural pathways in your brain, so that you also change who you are and who you're becoming. And that journey is the most amazing journey to go through. And as now a teacher of this work, it is one of the most amazing things to witness in somebody else, particularly educators, because when they show up that way, their students are watching them and they understand how to show up that way too.
Yeah. It's so true. And it's like, as someone who has a very openly rewired my brain, anyone can rewire their brain, everyone. It's not brainwashing, although I suppose that's a way of rewiring your brain too. But
like, yeah, it's where you are your own guru. That's
Yes.
what this, right? Here are the tools. Be who you want to be. Yeah.
Exactly. When I quit drinking, and that was a big part of this, it is creating a new identity, which was super scary. And oh my gosh, everyone's gonna think I had a problem with alcohol, and I could stay in that space, or I could be like, I don't care what they think, because this is what I want. It's a health and wellness decision. And so it was a ton of work, but anything worth having, in my opinion, usually is a lot of work. So
Yes.
you said something, and I want to get your opinion on this now. AI and the classroom. You know, I heard one speaker talk about, we're in the dial-up era of AI right now. And so, you know, the early days of AI. So what's your opinion, and what questions are you coaching to or fielding as you're empowering educators in this space?
It's a great question. So the thing that's the loudest to me in this conversation is, it's really easy to get super doom and gloom about what's happening. However, I feel that there is a moment of beautiful optimism here if we allow it, because never before in the history of humanity have we been forced to have a conversation about what makes us uniquely human. And I think that's a gift. I think that that's an important and essential conversation that we start to have, because as AI is starting to take over the tasks that can be duplicative of some of the things that we're doing already, what is it that we get to be on this planet? How do we get to show up in our own unique way? And I truly believe that this work of emotional intelligence, human connection, understanding the interconnectedness between us and the natural earth that we live in, that's the stuff. And we've come so far away from that in the way that we've lived our lives over the past few centuries, that I really want to believe that this is a moment where we can turn that story around and focus on the things that truly matter, which is that human piece, that our humanity.
Yeah. It's such a polarizing topic, and one that I know is entering the classrooms, and has been for a while. You know, with how kids are learning, you know, writing papers. It's not like when you and I were growing up. It's much different. Or writing books, or
right. And it requires a different type of teaching. It requires a different type of presence in the classroom. It requires a huge leap of skill set that, you know, education itself is usually behind the curve in a lot of these changes, just because of the nature of how big it is to move a policy, right? And to make big sweeping changes over a state or a country even. And so the thing that you do have agency in right now, because I also believe that organizations don't change until people change. And the only person you have any agency in changing is yourself, which is why we can continue to scream out into the void over some of these things, or take a mirror and really ask yourself, how am I showing up to this moment? Because life is always going to be lifey. There's always going to be some sort of change. There's going to be a curveball somewhere down the road, and the variable gets to be you. And so sure, we can have these very important, necessary conversations, and I don't want ever to get lost in the plot where we lose connection to ourselves and how we show up in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about the women in your life that have helped you become the woman you are today. So who are those women, Jen?
I am obsessed with the women in my life. I have always been fortunate to have incredibly good girlfriends my whole life. My mother and my sister and my grandmother when she was alive were also very important to me. And I have made a conscious effort to surround myself with women who lift each other up, who are excited about building a future that's better than the reality that we had growing up. I am very careful and intentional about who I let into my life. I have no patience for someone who is not emotionally intelligent, who's self-deprecating, who tears other women down, who leads with jealousy, I'm just not interested in any of that. I don't want to waste my time because, high tide raises all ships. And I am really intentional about who I carve time out for. And what's beautiful is those women in my life do the same thing. And so our time together is sacred. So whether it's, girls' night at the local community restaurant, or they're the women entrepreneur groups that I have been a part of over the years, I've met some fabulous women who have done nothing but inspire me to be better, and who I witness grow so that I know it's possible for me too.
Jen, I loved hearing about these super important women in your life. And one of the things that struck me that you said that I wanted to elaborate on a little bit more, because I've actually been running into this week myself, is do you see women, or do you still come across this where women are feeling envious or jealous, or are not lifting other women up, can be petty, rude, dismissive, self-deprecating? Are you seeing that in your day-to-day?
No, and really I think that's because it's an active choice that I've made. I don't put myself in a situation like that anymore, and if I do, I leave.
I was just going to ask you.
Yeah, if I do, I leave. I'm not available for it. And it's really interesting because my partner actually just said something to me yesterday about this very thing. She said, Jen, I've noticed something about you. And she said, you don't speak down to yourself. You aren't self-deprecating. That is not even part of your humor. And she said it in such a way, she was just like, it's just a noticing that I've had about you. And she asked me where that came from. And I grew up in Long Island in a very keeping up with the Joneses kind of a situation. I lived on the outskirts of a very wealthy community. And, this was a place where no judgment, but this is how it was. The girls would be getting nose jobs and chin jobs for their 16th birthday. And that just wasn't part of my family's world. And I couldn't compete with that. So I just didn't. And I was involved in theater when I was a kid early on, and had been both in school and out of school and in some professional theater communities and theater companies. And so I found a place where people celebrated themselves, and I was able to celebrate myself. And that just continued as I got older. Of course, I went through phases of, I wish I was a size smaller, and I wish I didn't have as much hair I needed to shave on my legs. And I mean, there's like all of the things that women typically go through, but it never became the spotlight of my story. And as I got older, my health and happiness and joy became far more important than any sort of time I would spend in self-deprecation. I'm not available for any of that.
Yeah, it's just a firm boundary. So if anyone's listening to this, being like, "How do I do that?" It's a choice and a boundary, and it's like that's just not what I'm subscribing to.
Right, unsubscribe.
Yep. So tell me what you do subscribe to, and by that I mean, what books are you reading?
Oh my gosh. Well, right now, I just finished Dan Brown's new book, Secret of Secrets, which was great. And I don't usually read fiction. Every once in a while, I say I need 5 fiction books a year in order to keep me grounded. I'm reading Brene Brown's new book right now. That's on my shelf right there. I recently finished Reset by Dan Heath. I got to meet him at an event. I totally fangirled him, and he signed my book. It was great.
I love that.
Right? Yeah. Then next, I'm just looking at my bookshelf right here. Rick Rubin's latest book, the Creative Acts, was so good. I surround myself with books having to do with social science, leadership, social psychology, marketing, artistry, creative spaces. That really gets my juices flowing. And Adam Grant's coming out with a new one. I love all of his stuff too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Living
Yeah.
life over here.
I just love reading. Surrounding myself with books is just something I love. Probably why we both became authors. So
Yes. Oh, for sure. My favorite store growing up was Barnes and Noble. It really was.
Oh, I know. I love wandering through bookstores now. There's something comforting about it, and it's just, and I, never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd become an author, and I don't know if you ever felt that way, and here we are.
Here we are. Yeah. It's amazing.
So talk about that just for a minute. If someone's interested in because there are a lot of people that are like, I want to write a book one day. So what advice do you give to someone that is like, wow, she's not now going to be a 2-time published author? Where do people start when they are on this journey to wanting to become an author?
Honestly, the biggest objection that I hear people say is they're like talking through, I really want to have this great idea, or I have this beautiful story, and you can see their eyes light up when they're telling you this thing. And then it slowly starts to fade when they're like, well, I don't know if anyone would read it. I don't know if anyone would really care about this thing. I don't know if I'm too embarrassed, or, I don't know how I feel about the visibility. And then all of a sudden it closes back down again, and then nothing happens, right? And so I think that one of the hardest parts about writing a book is being visible, is increasing your visibility and taking up space, having something to say, and knowing that people will read it and have an opinion about it and not be bothered by it. That is the most difficult thing that I've seen and observed and had to work through myself, of people actually reading the things that I have to say. And I think especially as women, where we're taught and told to stay small and not speak up and not to be too much or too big or too shiny or too bright. You don't want to make other people feel bad, or you don't want to offend anybody or ruffle any feathers. I call BS on all of it. I think there's one life that we get to live here. And if you have something to say, say it. And if you have a calling to do it on a big platform, girl, what are you waiting for? You have one life. And the fear we talked about earlier, that's the time where you get to navigate through that to do the scary thing. Your brain's not going to be on board with you writing a book. No way. That's happening. And I'll tell you something, that even though this is the first time I did a self-published back in 2019, and this was now through Penguin, I still, as I'm going through the process, am catching myself feeling overwhelmed, and moments of paralysis where it's like, oh my gosh, this is happening. And my body is not on board with what's happening on this timeline, right? Like I have my meetings coming up and meetings have passed and I'm like, all right, let's go. And my body's like, nope, not ready for this yet. So I consciously have to just slow my roll. I'm often found lying on my floor right here in my office in this full starfish position, crying just to get it out, right? Create that safety for myself, remind myself that this is not only safe, this is my dream. And how do I make that dream safe? How do I talk to myself in a way that my brain can relax and embrace this? Visualization and meditation are a huge part of my practice because I am literally creating these almost false memories for my brain to feel safe in that it's already done. You know, I visualize what the book signing is going to be like. Before I even signed with this, before I even had a publisher, before I even had an agent, I was visualizing what that would feel like. How would that be at these meetings? How would that go when I first met with that publisher for the first time? So when we got to that in real life, I was less activated by it because my brain had some sort of evidence that this was already okay. And so that's the hardest part. That is it. You can write the thing. You can write. Of course, that's the easy part. It's everything internally that feels like is working against you. That again is a moment for you to take back that steering wheel and get in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I'm glad that I'm interviewing you in this window. We're about both 90 days out, and I've been having some of those thoughts. And I've actually made that same statement. The writing the book was the easy part. It's this stage right now where I'm like, and it's a long road. So there's a lot of time to really get in your head if you let it. And when you're that vulnerable, depending on what topic someone writes about, it's hard. It is not for the faint of heart. So I'm glad that I'm not alone.
No, it is everyone. And anyone who says they haven't grappled with this is not telling the truth. This is our biology. You know, there's nothing wrong. It makes perfect sense. And in fact, everything's working exactly the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. So if people want to read your first book, pre-order your second book, look into your coaching, understand Empowered Educator, maybe they are a teacher listening to this, how do they become a part of it? Where can they find you, Jen?
Sure. Well, I guess the easiest thing to do is empowerededucator.com. That's where all of the things are, all the resources are. And if you're a teacher, we not only work with you individually, but what we do is go into schools. So we're working with whole school communities, teaching people how to navigate through all of these things that we've been talking about in the last 40 minutes or so, to remember their agency and show up as their best selves so they can have a healthy longevity in this career. And so their kids can have a different example of what it's like to be an adult in this world. So that's how we really reach the people that we work with. And as far as the book, empowerededucator.com/book, I mean, really everything's on there. And the best thing that you can do that I always say is, you know, if you're interested in the book, awesome. Our email content is fantastic. And so if you are looking for more reminders of this, so often we know these things already. We don't need more information. We need reminders. And that's always a good way to get that right in front of your face, to be like, oh, right, I need to check myself today because, believe it or not, I'm feeling a little stressed out and I didn't even realize it. And now I know. So those are the best places to reach me and the work that we do.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on all your success and continued success. And I love your message about women stop playing small. Take up your space and do whatever the thing is that you're looking to accomplish, or things for that matter. So you're a great role model for that. So thank you for coming on and being part of this.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great chat. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you too. If you all are looking for me, I am not hard to find. The hockey side of my life is at kwings.com. And then everything else, the big project I'm working on, Rebellious Success, is available for pre-order now, and the book will be in your mailbox on August 11th, and everything else that I do, coaching and podcasting and all the things, is at tonywill.com, and I'm on, I think, all the social media platforms as of right now, so you can find me there. And until next time.